Policy from UCLA, and he's the CEO of Botech Analysis, and was recently appointed as a lecturer at the UCLA Lushkin School of Public Affairs, where he teaches public policy for crime, cannabis, and other drugs. Mr. Rowe also served as the founding executive director of the Crime Justice Program at the Marin Institute of Urban Management at NYU, and coordinated the production of NYU's National Cannabis Science and Policy Summit. The summit represented an attempt to get past the sloganeering on both sides of the legalization debate and address the serious questions of how to eliminate the illicit market and make cannabis available for the responsible use without further increasing the prevalence of problem use or the initiation rate amongst teenagers. Mr. Rowe was brought in as an independent expert when the Arizona Citizens Initiative Review debated that state's cannabis legalization initiative. Brad co-authored Estimating the Size of the Medical Cannabis Market in Washington State for the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board in 2015, Reducing Drug Violence in Mexico, Options for Implementing Targeted Enforcement for the U.S. Department of Justice, and developing a violence-reducing drug enforcement strategy for Colombia for the DEA, responsible for a measurable reduction in homicides after the recommendations in his report were implemented. As an MPP student at UCLA, he was awarded the Anne C. Rosenfield Fellowship to work with the United Way of Greater Los Angeles on poverty alleviation and educational attainment for at-risk youth. So thank you very much, Brad, for all the work you put into making this seminar happen.
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and spending your day with us. Looking forward to an open conversation. Reality and facts do matter, and that's what we're hoping to get at today. I also want to thank some of my academic, scientific, and practitioner colleagues for sharing their expertise on these important subjects. I do have to give a lot of thanks to Jeffrey Chen here, who is one of our co-hosts today, and Rosanna Smart. I'm going to introduce and give you guys some information on both of them. So Jeffrey Chen is a physician, he's a researcher and a social entrepreneur who has for years worked at the intersection of the cannabis industry and academia. He's the incoming director of the UCLA Cannabis Research Initiative, launching in late 2017. He's the founder and director of the UCLA Cannabinoid Affinity Group, which is composed of over 40 multidisciplinary UCLA faculty. Jeff has presented extensively on the topic of medical cannabis, speaking at institutions ranging from the RAND Corporation to the UCLA Center for East-West Medicine, to Senator Feinstein's office. Jeff is a David Geffen Fellow, UCLA Wolfen Entrepreneurial Award recipient, and U.S. patent holder. He received his MD and MBA from UCLA, just that institution right up the street. And Rosanna Smart, she is with us today. Thank you, Rosanna. She has put us on her national tour. We're lucky to have her. She's been up in Alaska looking at issues around cannabis up there. She's been out on the East Coast, and really just a great resource of information on what's happening in different places in the country. Rosanna Smart, she's an associate economist with the RAND Corporation. Her research is in applied microeconomics with a focus on issues related to health disorders, illicit markets, drug policy, and criminal justice. Her previous work has studied variation in medical marijuana laws and associated health outcomes. She has also worked on projects studying the recreational market in Washington State, using the state's marijuana traceability system, policy mechanisms to increase labor demand for workers with criminal records, which is going to be an interesting topic that we'll be covering in some depth today, and the effects of Proposition 47 on the workload of criminal justice agencies in Los Angeles County. She previously worked as a research associate for Botech Analysis, which is the firm I am from, and as a research assistant at the Brookings Institution. She received her PhD in economics from the University of California, Los Angeles. So, Rosanna, thank you very much. Jeffrey Chen, thank you very much for all the All right. So we're going to move on after a short intro. I'm just going to sort of put today's topics into context a little bit. We will start out. Dr. Mark Kleiman from NYU is going to join us from New York by Skype. He's going to be discussing the cannabis research agenda. Later we'll have California Assemblyman Reginald Jones Sawyer. He is a representative from the south side of Los Angeles here, who will be discussing cannabis business opportunities in California and some of the state level decisions that will be affecting entrepreneurs in the area. Dr. Timothy Fong, the director of the UCLA Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship, will be discussing addiction and the abuse of cannabis. Hillary Bricken is a private practice attorney who is a partner in a firm that has offices both in Seattle and Los Angeles and other locations, but she just recently moved down to the Los Angeles area, so we're very fortunate to have her with us. She's been working with dozens of firms to establish and legitimize themselves in the cannabis space. Dr. Jeffrey Raber will be with us later. He's the co-founder and president of The Workshop, who is an expert in technologies of production and testing. And I do have to give you guys our apologies. Rosalie Pacula, the co-director from the RAND Drug Policy Research Center, she had to cancel. She had a family emergency yesterday. We just found out last night. So I apologize. We're going to fill the slot. We actually have several topics and lots of resources we can draw from, so excited that we'll fill that slot. And then at the end, we're going to have just a short discussion, just to do some wrap-ups and takeaways from the day. Would love to hear back from you guys. As always, I think a lot of the people that you're talking to, whether they're in research, whether they're in politics, whether they're in business, whether they're looking at the law, what you guys are thinking about, what your challenges are, what you guys want to do, informs our work. So this is a discussion. So we will be sharing, and I know that Professor Kleiman, Mark Kleiman, who will be on shortly, is a proponent of that. He really likes active and live discussions. So just put today a little bit into context. Cannabis legalization could be the greatest social experiment of our time. Not since the repeal of prohibition of alcohol in 1933 have we stood at the doorstep of such great potential for cultural, political, and social change. The social norms of the past decade will change radically, past decades. The lenses that we look at legalization will be refocused many times as these coming years, as they pass. Mothers watching their kids playing in a backyard today would not be judged for having a glass of wine, a cocktail, or a beer. But could the same be said for smoking a joint or smoking a bong while the kids are playing in the backyard? Kind of makes me giggle in some ways, but that may become one of our social norms. It begs the question, is what we really care about behavioral toxicity that results from being impaired, or is it the act of the consumption of a substance that has not been completely normalized in today's society? What if instead the mother decided to drink a THC-infused lemonade or rice, as long as she kept it away from the kids? Would that be more socially acceptable? I don't know. We have to ask ourselves these questions. Men and women of law enforcement, they'll have to contend with the fact that there's a new definition of their role. Managing the trafficking of cannabis in states that have endorsed full recreational legal cannabis sale and consumption. Gone are the days of arresting people merely for possession or intent to sell or for trafficking. The zeal of the drug warrior role of police will be changed to protecting the profits of licensed businesses and the revenues of the state. Increased use will bring new challenges for patrol officers around the determination of impaired driving and the loss of investigatory tools like probable cause for search based solely on the strong smell of cannabis. Teachers and administrators may have good reason to be concerned about greater access for teens or perhaps for the more frequent consumption by these young people. Access to cannabis in at least one reputable study shows the correlations of decline in academic performance, especially in classes that require numerical and mathematical skills. In that study out of Maastricht University in the Netherlands, on average students were 5.4% more likely to pass courses when they were banned from entering cannabis shops. Just simply on that natural experiment, on the social change that happened over there for a short period of time. The effects were stronger for low performance students. So what are the ramifications for us here in Los Angeles? We have students, LAUSD is challenged to bring up proficiency scores in math and science, and they're trying to improve graduation rates. How do we contend with those challenging, maybe conflicting ideas? So where are things headed for entrepreneurs who want to stay out of the crosshairs of federal enforcement, who are dealing with cash and struggling to get good legal and accounting advice? They have yet to receive clear indication from the U.S. Attorney General on whether they can expect to be left alone, or if they are in perfect compliance with California law. According to pending legislation, without proper paperwork, businesses in Los Angeles next year could be looking at fines as high as $25,000 a day, and the landlord could as well if you're not properly permitted. So very serious changes for businesses. Los Angeles currently has almost 140 properly licensed medical cannabis dispensaries and 1,400 that are not. It will likely be the goal of government to rigorously work to push those 1,400 illegal operators out of business as quickly as possible to protect proper market participants. Yet, what are we to do as a society to welcome current black market operators from the cold? Does the government have a role in aiding that transition, helping registration, advising small cannabis businesses so that they can compete in a new market? And what is cannabis anyway? There are hundreds of chemicals we understand little about, and the claims that today's bud tenders make about indicas and sativas in relation to pain relief or delivery of a specific high maybe look back upon the same way that we look back at ancient claims that bloodletting cured certain ills. This is certainly not to say that cannabis is not used medicinally and used medicinally well for some, but much of what is passed on for knowledge about the effects of cannabis are closer to folklore than pure science. And that has much to do with the fact that researchers have been largely unable to properly test cannabis in laboratory settings with human subjects under proper research conditions. Over 20 million adult Californians, think about that number, 20 million, will have legal access to cannabis 4 months from now. And yet we have not adopted standards for dosing that a reasonable person could follow. There are 20-ounce bottles of infused lemonade that contain 200 milligrams of THC, enough to put 3 teenagers in the hospital for a panic attack. One study commissioned by the state of Colorado put the ratio of bioavailability of THC at 5 milligrams of inhaled THC from a joint as equaling 1 milligram of ingested THC from an edible. Okay? Pretty easy math. Although the absorption by lung tissue is far quicker than that through the digestive system. So add to that the real world, yet not studied combinations that present themselves to consumers such as alcohol or other drugs, and we can be comfortable in saying there's a lot of learning that we have to do, and that the trial and error period for many individuals will be fraught with misadventures. Even with considerable knowledge for consumers, we will likely be left with a market that will contain a good many people with a control problem. We have many times the number of individuals today who consume cannabis on a daily or near daily basis as there were in the early 90s. And about half of those people meet the diagnostic criteria.